everybody. It's Jessica Jones. I'm the Cryptid Huntress, and I am so glad that you guys are here with me today. My goodness, we have such a fantastic show tonight. We're going to be talking about something that I actually had an encounter with when I was in high school. That's a pigman. Okay, this is a story I've never told publicly that I can recall. Okay, and so we're going to go there tonight because we have Jeff from Strangeology Podcast here in the studio tonight. If you guys have not subscribed to Strangeology Podcast on YouTube and listen to him all over podcasting platforms and especially on Instagram, gosh, he's got the best videos. Please go subscribe and go give Jeff a follow over there. You will be so glad you did, I promise. So he lives in Vermont, and they have some really awesome cryptids up there that we're going to get into tonight. And I feel like I've really been focusing on New England lately and all those states up there. I had no idea there was so much high strangeness up there until recently. Okay. And I also have a very special co-host here with me tonight. I have Cryptidville. His real name's Mark Machek. Okay. And you guys have seen him. He's joined me on the show here several times, talking about the dogman of the LBL and other topics. So I'm going to bring both of them up in just a second. In the meanwhile, if you guys would like to follow along with all of my shows, I have a website. That's the cryptidhuntress.com, where you can find all of my shows, all the events that I'm going to be speaking at. They're all there on my website. Okay. Also, if you'd like to support what I do and my work, I have a Patreon. That's the Cryptid Huntress over on Patreon. And thank you guys so much for all your support. I post all of my remote viewing data for my Thursday night show there in the Patreon. And I have a couple of targets I haven't done shows on my channel that I'm going to be posting up in there probably tomorrow, including the eclipse and what is happening on Monday. I have remote viewed it. I did a show on Scary Cast today. It airs tonight at some point. We're on the Scary Cast podcast, and we talk about the remote viewing predictions for Monday. You definitely want to tune in to that. I'm going to post that up in my Patreon. Also, I have a shop that's called War Woman Goods. I give free Cryptid Huntress merch away with every package. Anything you buy over there, I'll stick in something that has the Cryptid Huntress written on it. Okay. So thank you for your support. All right. Well, let's get into our show today. And I want to give a huge shout out to all my moderators, all my channel members. By the way, if you'd like to become a member of the channel, hit that join button, and I put exclusive content out for those members as well. But shout out to everybody who supports me. I love you guys. Okay. So on this episode, I have Mark Machek here in the studio to be my co-host. I'm going to go ahead and pull him up, actually. You guys will know Mark as Cryptidville in the chats. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Jessica. Thank you for having me as a co-host.
Oh man, we're gonna have fun tonight. So this is amazing. I get my Saturday nights over here at the channel. Thank you for joining me on your Saturday night.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me over.
Of course. I know there's some groups of people out of the LBL. Now you don't live too far from there, and I know a few people that are up there doing some, I guess, hanging out this weekend. I'm surprised you're not out of the LBL this weekend.
Put me on the spot, are you?
Oh no! Listen, I've had people that have been calling me asking me if I was there. So yeah, so I understand.
No,
actually, either. I'm busy.
Actually, I had pre-committed to being a co-host with you tonight.
Yes.
Prior to being asked to come over there to the LBL with my research partner. You may know him. He goes by the name of War Criminal 7, and I just wish him the best of luck in what he's got going on over there, and that he's safe over there with all the people that are, from what I understand, there's a lot of people over there.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I got to you first. Thank you. I got you first. I did. Okay. Well, we have such a great show tonight. We're going to be talking about some cryptids that I've never talked about publicly before, including one that I've had an encounter with maybe. I'm going to say maybe. I got chased by something, and we went to go see the Pigman that night. Okay. And something did chase me out of the woods. Now, I'm going to wait and tell that story until when we pull Jeff up tonight.
Sounds like a plan.
But yeah. Okay. Well, let me go ahead and pull up Jeff. Okay. Because let me give you a little bio, a little background on him. Growing up in rural New England, Jeff had his had his fair share of bizarre sightings and encounters with the strange and unexplained. The topic of cryptozoology, UFOs and aliens, the paranormal, world mysteries, conspiracies have continued to be an interest of his for as long as he can remember. Strangeology was created to share knowledge of these subjects and to research and find out new information and truths behind them. And it's also to find humor and levity as well. Because who doesn't love a good Bigfoot meme? Man, he does so much more than Bigfoot memes on his channel. Please help me welcome to the show, Jeff from Strangeology Podcast.
Hey. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you for being here.
Jeff. Yeah. Stoked to be here tonight.
Oh, totally. Okay. Well, I was telling you before we went live that I love your channel and I love your all your posts. It's very creative, but you cover some of the most obscure cryptids all over.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have to do with local legends and lore, right?
Yes. There's so much out there. And it just kind of goes back to my interest in the strange and unexplained, the whole Fortean world. Since I was a kid, always gravitating towards books on Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and UFOs and watching all these TV shows and specials in the 90s. And it's kind of brought me to where I am today for sure.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I love fellow cryptid enthusiasts. Okay, I do. And I had a whole lot of compliments on that sweater that I wore at Christmas. So everyone who is watching who asked me about my Happy Howler Day sweater, that came from Jeff's website, y'all. His Etsy shop. He's got all the cryptid gear and merch over there in your Etsy store. I guess it's Strangeology on Etsy, right?
Yep, that's the one. Yeah, I have a background in graphic design, so I kind of, when I started Strangeology, I figured I needed some kind of merch to go along with it, and so that's that whole branch of the thing that I do. So I have a home state cryptids collection, which is like all the popular cryptids in each state in America. I even have a few Canadian ones that I started working on, but I still need to finish, and all sorts of like cryptid encounter teas and that kind of thing. Lots of Mothman stuff too.
Yeah. Well,
And you know what that means? That means there's something there for everyone.
That's right.
there is. Now, so I guess, okay, I have Cryptidville on here tonight because Cryptidville, Mark, has had a lot of interesting encounters, okay, from everything from Dogman to, I mean, we don't even know all the encounters that you've had, Mark, okay, because I've really just talked to you mostly about your Dogman encounters out there.
I've had all kinds, you name it, I've experienced it pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have never encountered a Pigman, but you know, if it's paranormal, UFO related, and I'm sorry, I'm not a member of the UAP crew. I still call them UFOs.
Me too.
Same.
You know, I've encountered some cryptids. I've encountered some things that I don't know what they are. That just don't fit any classification for anything that we've ever ran into. So yeah, I've had more than my fair share, and I'm willing to donate those experiences to anybody that wants them.
Oh yeah.
Because
yeah. You have some great experiences. Absolutely. Like I've really enjoyed talking with you about the ones that you've talked with me about so far. But let's talk about some Vermont cryptids tonight. Okay. What is going on with the New England states, Jeff? Like, I can't believe the number of interesting cryptids, even like Wendigos and the White Walkers and Skinwalkers. I mean, you guys have some interesting things that you see like on the Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Well, New England is very old. There's a lot of strange old stuff, a lot of really interesting history that goes along with it. New England contains the Green Mountains, which is an offshoot of the Appalachian Mountains. If people didn't know that, that range goes from northern Georgia all the way to the edge of Canada, like Newfoundland, and even before then, you've got the Scottish Highlands, and even the mountains in Norway and Sweden are part of that mountain chain from way back in like Pangea, even before then. So there's a lot of really old, interesting stuff. And each state in New England has something going on. You've got the specter moose in Maine. You've got the woods devils in Coas County of northern New Hampshire, which I'm not too far, stone's throw away from there. You've got the Dover demon and puckwudgies in Massachusetts. There's the great New England vampire panic of the 1800s, which involved Mercy Brown, which gets lumped into a lot of cryptid stuff, but it's not a cryptid thing. And there's the melon heads of Connecticut, and then Vermont, where I'm from, has a lot of stuff. There's Champ, of course, which New York also shares Champ with. I should mention that because any convention I'm at and I have my Vermont Champ shirt out for sale, and people are like, no, that's a New York cryptid. I'm like, we can share it. Plus Burlington, Vermont has a Champ exhibit, and the infamous Sandra Mancy photo was taken on the Vermont side of Lake Champlain. And then there's all sorts of other stuff. There's Bigfoot sightings. There's the Bennington Triangle. You could also talk about the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. There's just so much. It's a little bit overwhelming at times, but there's so much to talk about. If anyone's familiar, the book behind me, Weird New England by Joseph Citro, he chronicled a lot of this high strangeness, weird stories, weird history, cryptids and creatures, and all that. So definitely check that out if you don't have that in your personal collection of books.
Oh yeah, I came across that when I was doing some research on the Vermont cryptids up there. And you mentioned the Appalachian Mountains, and I feel like I've been doing a lot of my focus of some of my shows on things that are in the Appalachian Mountains, because I do my field research in the Appalachian Mountains. Here, I'm in North Georgia, and so we have a pretty dense population of Bigfoots in the mountains here. And actually, I believe the mountains kind of go into Alabama a little bit too. And so, we do most of our research all over the South. Okay. But my main focus recently has mostly been in Georgia, where I live. But we're getting reports of velociraptors in the mountains, like modern day dinosaurs and stuff. Do you have reports of those around there? Have you heard of any stories?
I'm not familiar with living dinosaur sightings in Vermont, at least. I can't say that I've heard that, but we certainly have a lot of other things.
Yeah, well, you guys have had something that looks kind of like a pterosaur. When I was looking at the map of cryptids, it looks like there could be pterosaurs or thunderbirds, and the line's a little blurry between pterosaurs and thunderbirds too, in my opinion.
Yeah. So there have been sightings of what people might refer to as thunderbirds. I know people personally who have seen extremely large birds that don't fit the hawk or the eagle or the peregrine falcon that live in this area. Very large birds that are maybe 4 or 5 feet tall when they're on the ground standing with like a 15-foot wingspan. Not normal for this part of the world, to say the least. Condor maybe that big, but they don't live around here.
They're probably not shooting lightning bolts through their eyes. I'm just kidding.
No.
Oh man. Well, okay. So, my favorite cryptid that I would really like to talk to you about tonight is the Pigman. in Vermont. And I'd like for you to tell us about the Pigman there. And then I will mention a little bit about my personal story with Pigman, because there's not just one Pigman. It seems like there's a legend of Pigman all over the country, not just Vermont, not just Georgia. There's a lot of them. And some of the stories, if you research them, they sound eerily similar.
Yes, they do. So the story of the Northfield Pigman, it's a story that, I wasn't actually familiar with until about, I want to say about 15 years ago, where people started blogging about this old legend in the town of Northfield, which is in central Vermont, kind of in the capital region. It's the next town south from Montpelier, the state capital. And so the story goes is that there is this humanoid pigman type creature that lurks in the forests around the town of Northfield, specifically around this road, an area called the Devil's Wash Bowl. Kind of sets the tone of the whole thing, right? And so there were theories that maybe people were seeing this thing. They thought it was maybe a deranged local butcher that decided to go off grid and live off the land and scare people, and maybe steal a couple livestock or two, and just be a general menace. But the main story that people often cite as the legend is that there was this 17-year-old teenager back in 1951 named Sam Harris, and he was a bit of a troublemaker. And around Halloween, the night before, actually, they called it Picket Night, or Cabbage Night is another alternative, Night of Mischief, where he loaded up a bag of, eggs, you name it, to just kind of raise hell around town. And he went missing. He didn't return home, and his parents got the police involved. There was a big search, hundreds of people searching for this kid, Sam Harris, and nothing ever turned up. They'd never found a body or signs of anything. And that can happen a lot up here. There's a lot of pretty big wilderness in Vermont, even today. But back, 70 something years ago, there was a lot less development, and Vermont's a rural state already, really. But so about 20 years later, in the 1970s, one of the residents in town was up at night, and he heard something kind of outside of his house. And so he turned on a floodlight and was peeking outside of his door, and he saw this creature just kind of peeking out of the shadows from where the light was able to go to. And he saw this kind of weird pig-like face. And the second it saw him, it ran off. He could hear it running out into the woods. Now, a few days later, the local high school, Northfield High School, was having a school dance. And there were a few kids that they had snuck out behind the high school. And I've actually gone there. I've been out to Northfield a few times. I don't live too far away from there, but it's kind of like up on top of a hill, and behind the school is just like this really steep embankment, and it backs up to a forest. So they're hanging out back there, probably on the soccer field that they have behind the school. Hell of a hike for for the athletes going up there. But they see this white furred, 6 foot something tall creature come out of the woods, and they're sitting there smoking cigarettes, drinking beers, and they're terrified. They're like, what is this thing? And it's this pig-faced looking creature with white fur, has no clothes on, and it scares them to death. So they all run into the gymnasium, and they're screaming like there's a monster out there. And the part of the story goes is that like a few brave youths some other fellow students join them. They go out to go see what's going on and to, confront this creature. And by the time they get there, it's gone. It had slipped back into the woods. Now, after this sighting, there were several other locals who reported waking up at night, hearing something rummaging through their trash, and they go out with some flashlights, or they turn on their outside porch light, and they see this humanoid white furred creature with a pig face going through their trash, or coming after their livestock. There were apparently reports of livestock mutilations or just livestock going missing. And so how Sam Harris ties into this is that people believe that this creature may have actually been Sam Harris. Maybe that Sam Harris had made a deal with the devil. There were also rumors that he was cruel to animals, specifically pigs. There were rumors that he would hollow out heads of pigs and wear them like a mask, kind of like a Leatherface style from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so that's kind of
that's so creepy.
Yeah, yeah. And then by the time like the 1980s, like late 80s, early 90s rolled around, there was apparently, this was a story that I came across on a message board that somebody relayed, that he had either a friend or a sibling, friend of a friend, who knows exactly, that a group, two couples, boyfriend, girlfriend, two couples, went up to Devil's Washbowl Road, which is where a lot of people had reported seeing the Pigman. So they believed that his lair was like in a cave somewhere. And it's Devil's Washbowl Road cuts through over Moortown Mountain. And so it kind of separates the towns of Moortown, Vermont, and Northfield. It's pretty remote. It's on a class 4 road, which is you can only fit one car down it. It's not maintained in the summer or in the winter. You can't drive it in the winter. There are a few houses on each end of it. One end connects Moortown, one end connects Northfield, but there's about a mile and a half stretch in between, which is just this single road. There's an embankment down the side that goes down to a river, probably several hundred feet. There are no guardrails or anything. So they went up to this area, and apparently there's a bunch of caves up there. Now, I've been up there. There was a new road being developed as an offshoot that I went hiking up once, but I didn't go far enough to see. Didn't want to run into the Pigman, really. But yeah. So the story was that these couples went up to do a stakeout to see if they could catch a glimpse of the Pigman, and they found the caves. And one of the couples took one cave, the other couple took another cave that was nearby, and they were going to camp out and just see what would happen, being teens and being fearless or whatever. And so one couple is in this cave and they see all these animal bones in there. So something had been occupying the cave. Could have been a mountain lion, could have been a bear. They weren't entirely sure. They were a little bit uneasy at the situation. And then as they're kind of like settling in there, suddenly the other couple in the other caves hear them screaming. Turns out that the Pigman had come into the cave, taken a rock and bashed the boyfriend's head in with the rock and dragged his body off. Well, the girlfriend was sitting there like screaming in horror at what had just happened. And so apparently the other couple came to see what was going on, and they were like, oh, we got to get out of here. And I guess the police were called. I tried looking to see if there were any reports to verify this, short of like going to like the town clerk's office in Northfield, which I would like to do sometime, but it's hard to do these days with the limited schedule. But there wasn't anything to verify those claims exactly. It could have been just people making stuff up on the internet. But I will say that there haven't really been any pigman sightings that I'm aware of since then, specifically. However, on the BFRO, there was a report that I ran across from the Moortown Northfield area of a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot that had white hair. And so
I was actually
something
going to ask you about
makes me
that.
wonder. Yeah, something makes me
Mhm.
wonder if maybe what people were seeing back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s, and who knows, maybe later, that it may have been a Bigfoot with maybe a facial deformity or something like that. I just have to wonder if that's what that may have been, but
Well,
that's the
yeah,
story of
because
Northfield Pigman in a nutshell.
okay, I love this. I absolutely love it, and I have a couple of questions and some thoughts on this because we do have a lot of white things. I say things because I'm from Georgia. Okay, white things all over the country. We have reports of white Sasquatches, white Bigfoots. Uh, there are other white creatures like white dogmen looking creatures and stuff up in Maine, from what I can recall. I mean, every region has a white thing of some sort, and
Yeah.
so John Fortman actually had a really interesting comment in here, and it was, I think it's Coco actually, but this is about the Japanese vampires. Okay, so this is interesting because I love making these connections. Japanese vampires are white furred too. Theory goes that it is not fur but filaments of a white fungus. Wow, that's really cool. Because when I look at because when it's dark and you see something that's really frightening, I mean, there could be some misidentification. You don't know what you're looking at, but maybe it just had like a snouty nose. It had a snout on it or something. I don't know. You're Mark, you're familiar with Bigfoot. Okay. You've had your share of Bigfoot reports and taken reports. Do you think that this could have been the Pigman could actually be a Bigfoot maybe?
Well, that's what I was thinking. The things that were described in the story are things that potentially you would hear a Bigfoot do, like hanging out in a cave, using a rock or something as a weapon, like a rock, or you hear of them using down trees or logs, pieces of logs or whatever. And the way that it's portrayed in the story, um, leads me to believe that it's very possible that it could have been a misidentified Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And that whole white hair thing, um, you know, I don't know if there's like a certain percentage that are genetically white or solid black or whatever, but I've seen black ones. I've seen you know uh, ones with the prettiest Irish color colored hair. I know that probably came out all jumbled up, but uh, uh, brown ones, kind of a reddish brown tint. Um, Ones that look straight up like Chewbacca off of Star Wars. With light brown hair, gray. Um, I've never seen one that's solid white, but um, I've heard of people seeing those. And that whole facial feature thing, uh, you know, when you look at the different types, uh, some of them do have, not real long protruding snouts, but short muzzles that that can, you know, could give that impression that it has like a hog type nose or a pig man type nose. Um, so it's definitely a possibility in my opinion.
Well, when I was doing some, pulling up some pictures, and you type in the Northfield Pigman or the Vermont Pigman. Things like this came up, and I was like, man, that looks more like some kind of gremlin or something. It doesn't really look this much like a pigman, but then I came across this drawing too. It's like it looks more like a dog man kind of. So it's kind of all over the place with as far as exactly what this thing looks like. Of course, that picture that I had on the thumbnail for the show, y'all, I know it is a scary looking pig man. It is. But it looks more like that one. This one does look more like a dog man or like a bat squatch or something, So I don't know. I just love the story. I think it's a great local cryptid. Now, do the people out at Northfield, did they I don't say benefit off of this. Did they kind of run with it and have like a festival, like a Pigman festival, Jeff? Like, did they embrace it or no?
As far as I know, there's nobody that has put together a festival. Maybe that's my calling, to put on a festival in Vermont for the Pigman. But besides some blog posts and some coverage in local media, there hasn't really been I guess an embracing of the story in places like Point Pleasant, West Virginia for the Mothman, or the Hopkinsville Goblins, or anything like that, or the Loveland Frogman in Ohio, which there's now a festival for.
Oh yeah. Well, I think the story of the Pigman is a little more morbid, and so there's probably not going to be a festival. It wouldn't be so fast to make a festival over a homicidal Pigman, probably.
Right? Yeah. It's not really one of the cute cryptids that a lot of these festivals are more based about, for sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've seen some comments in the chat about Dogman, maybe a connection there. And there are some accounts of Dogman in Vermont. If you'd like to hear about any of that.
Yes, of course I would. Well, how about I tell my story real briefly about my experience with Pigman, because I had almost forgotten about this. Okay, because this happened in high school, and we actually we have local legends here in Georgia, of course. And when I was in high school, I guess you get bored. You're looking for something fun to do, and there was the legend of Pigman in the county where I lived, and the story behind it went. There was a man who had actually unalived his family, and he had buried them in the front room of his house. Like he buried them underneath the house, but under like the front room of his house. And if you went to his house at night, late at night, and you get out of your car and you walk up to the house, he will run out from behind the house and chase you off. And so, of course, what did I do? I had to go check it out. And when I was in high school, and I think I went more than once. I went a couple of times, but each time that I went, as soon as I got out of the car and I had my friends with me, we would get out, and of course, it was like the brave guys went first. But we would walk towards that house, and sure enough, something chased us out of there. And I never got a look at what it was. I never did. All you could hear was something. It sounded like a herd of elephants running through the forest. Okay, because it was heavily wooded around. And so in my mind, I'm seeing like the Pigman that's on the thumbnail for the show. Okay, I'm seeing some man that's either turned into a pig. I don't know why they called him Pigman. They said he looked like a pig. He was half pig, half man. He had turned into a pig or something. So of course, what did I do? I got really interested in it, and I was really big into our mass media at school. And so one day, me and my friends, we actually went and shot video of the property and the house. We went inside the house, and sure enough, all the floorboards in that front room had been removed, and there was a hole at least 6 feet deep into the ground full of children's clothing in there. And so I don't know. I can't. It's been a long time since I did that. I have the VHS tape here somewhere. I need to go back and look into that. But that was the legend of Pigman, and we actually did a story on it back when I was in high school, back in the 1990s. So, but the story is kind of similar, though. It's kind of like a homicidal Pigman, So
Yeah.
it's really scary. Okay, but that's my story. I really never talked about that because I kind of forgot about it. Okay, until we started getting into Pigman. Now I want to hear about the dogmen and all the werewolves that you guys have up there.
Yeah. Yeah. This was something that was brought to my attention by Carrick St. Laurent, who is a cryptozoologist based in New Hampshire. And he told me to look into the story of the Hound of Cold Hollow. And I was like, what is this? And so I looked into it. And it turns out that in the town of Enosburg Falls, which is northern Vermont, it's close to the Canadian border. There, gosh, I think it was like the early 2000s that there was this woman that kept seeing this dogman type creature around her property. And she was getting audio recordings of it. You can find those on a blog somewhere. I don't have the link handy, unfortunately. I can probably send it to you later to put in your descriptions and stuff. But basically, it's just accounts of people seeing this thing out in the woods. Now, there aren't wolves officially in Vermont anymore. They were made extinct back in the late 1800s, although there have been reports recently of wolves making their way across Canada and reintroducing themselves into this part of the country. I've seen a coy dog before, which is kind of like a hybrid, like wolf coyote type thing that ran across the road when I was driving home and one night late, and it was like the winter, so the headlights on the car were really illuminating everything because there was snow on the ground, and this like massive thing just ran across the road, and I was like, what was that?
On two legs?
No, it was on all fours. I was on all fours.
I'm kidding.
And I know how big wolves are in real life. When I was in the 6th grade, there was a wolf sanctuary in, I believe it was Ipswich, Massachusetts, and took a field trip there when I was like 12 years old and got to see this wolf pack. And the alphas were in this, it was kind of like the den for the wolves that was closer to the main facility. And they were big, like, and you think reports of dogmen being 6-7 feet tall, even bigger than that, it's kind of crazy. But as I was looking into this Hound of Cold Hollow story, I ran across old accounts of some loggers, sawmill workers that were in what's now the Groton State Forest, which I live maybe like a half an hour from there. And there was an account where there was a group of 3 loggers that were out in the woods, and somehow one of them got separated from the other 2. Not sure if he just kind of went to go scout out some other areas, and he went missing. And a few days later, he comes out of the woods and he's just like totally deranged, talking about seeing this man wolf creature out there, and it drove him insane. And so I'm like, oh man, I live like right near there. And there were theories that potentially, because there's stories in Quebec, Canada, which is not far. It's maybe like an hour drive, 2 hours drive at the most. And there's stories there about the loup-garou, or what people from Louisiana call the rougarou, may have been up there and worked their way down to Vermont. Maybe they came over on a boat from Europe or something like that. I don't know. But there are some interesting accounts of some dogmen in Vermont. I heard a story from someone who had reached out to me a while ago that they saw something. They were outside on their deck one day, and they live in on a pretty like rural property up on a mountainside, lots of acreage, and most of it's just woods, backs up to a state forest. And They were outside and they just like walking on their deck, and they heard this like unearthly like scream howl, and they looked over to the wooded edge of the property, which kind of went up a hill a little bit, and they saw this 6-7 foot tall bipedal thing. They were like, it's probably a bear or something. It was like, no, that wasn't a bear. And it was like moving trees out of the way as it like saw them and ran off. My first thought was like, well, it's either going to be a Bigfoot or a dog man. And, I wasn't at that point, I wasn't aware of the Hound of Cold Hollow story or the story from those loggers in the Groton State Forest. And after hearing about those, I was thinking about that account that was told to me, and I was just like, that may have been a dog man. I'm not sure. And interestingly, there's in that region, there were also accounts of some other people having footprints appear, tiny footprints, like child-sized footprints, bare footprints, appear around their chicken coop in the middle of winter. And they walked off and just stopped. So there may be some kind of like Fey activity as well in certain parts of this region of the world, which is like,
oh wow.
Yeah,
Well, Jeff, okay, so when my team's out there doing research, we have an account of Bob, one of the guys on our team. He was doing some scouting and was down by the creek and an area where we research, and there was one tiny child-sized bare footprint, like a little human footprint in the mud by the creek, but there were no other footprints. There was one. And so we kind of were like, okay, well, it could be a couple of things, because this is in the middle of nowhere. It could be a baby Sasquatch, maybe, but it seemed more, it was like superhuman. It was like human, it didn't look like Sasquatch, like a Sasquatch foot. It looked human, but we were also thinking, well, it could have been like an ET, I guess, but I never even thought about it being the Fae or something. And maybe it could, like a gnome or a little person.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure, what it could be, but the Fae is a topic that I'm horribly underversed in, but I did an episode on my show about the Alaska Triangle, and came across stories of people running into little people like in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of miles from anything, where they see they're like, there was an account of some people going up a river, and they saw this little guy, maybe like 3 feet tall or less, with a pointed hat, smoking a pipe. And he just kind of got up. They observed him for like half an hour, and he got up and like went into the woods. And like, what do you do with that information?
Gnomes.
Yeah.
Well, it's a typical gnome, and I had Charles Andrews on my show. He's a Bigfooter from up in the Catskill Mountains, and that's where he lives, directly across the mountain from the infamous Rip Van Winkle story. And they're infamous for the gnomes there and the little people up in that area. And one of my teammates, Dave Pardue, he's out of North Carolina with Carolina Cryptid Field Research Organization. He has a video, and it has little people in it. Okay, there's a video, you can see them. They look like they're walking in a single file line. Okay, like just having a good old time through the woods. I think he filmed this at a national forest. Okay, a national forest, and they're just like they're like little people. We were kind of on the fence, like, well, are they little people like gnomes, or are they ETs? That's kind of our where we're at right now. It's like, are they little people or ETs? So. But they're in the woods. They're definitely out there. And Dave has a video of some.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's like thermal imaging. So it's thermal. So you can only see their body temperature. You can't see like what they look like exactly. You can just see their heat signature.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's cool.
I'll have to check out that footage at some point.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. Well, okay. So, wow. So little people are a thing up north too. And so we've got them down here. You guys got them up there.
Yeah.
To also have something called the awful. Are you familiar with the awful?
Yeah.
What is the awful?
Well, it's one of my favorite named cryptids. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So the story behind this, and it kind of ties into like Thunderbirds, is that back in the 1920s, 1925, the town of Richford, Vermont. It's right on the Canadian border to Quebec, and the first sighting of this, where there were some mill workers, and they were walking down the street, and they looked up and saw this massive bird-like creature, which a lot of people described it as looking almost griffin-like. And it was just kind of staring at them menacingly. And it was so horrendous, so awful, if you will, that one of the men in this group that witnessed it apparently had a heart attack. And he recovered, but apparently would have like nightmares about this thing for like weeks and weeks and months after. And in the following year or two after this initial sighting, lots of locals in Richford and the surrounding towns would see this giant bird-like creature flying over cornfields, perched on top of telephone poles and different buildings. And it was more of just kind of like a menace. It didn't, as far as I found in my research, it never really attacked anybody. It would just kind of hang out and look at people, which is interesting. There was one story of a local farmer's wife named Oella Hopkins, who went outside one day to hang laundry to dry. It was like a warm summer day. She's hanging up the laundry. All of a sudden, family dog who's outside starts barking at something, and it's barking towards the house. And she turns around and she sees this massive bird creature perched on the roof of the farmhouse. And so naturally she runs towards the house to get inside and spends the rest of the day hiding under the bed until like her husband comes home. And by that point, early evening, it had flown off. Now, interestingly, stories of the awful inspired H.P. Lovecraft to come up to Vermont to kind of like investigate, and I guess it inspired a little bit of his writing. So that's an interesting little historical tidbit. But after the mid late 20s, sightings of it kind of fell off. But as recently as 2006, and maybe even since then, some people occasionally report seeing a massive Thunderbird type creature in northern Vermont. I've covered it before on my channel, and I've had people comment saying that like, oh yeah, like I saw that thing back in like the 70s or the 80s, just kind of like flying around in the area. And you know, that's not a documented species in Vermont or anywhere else nearby. So
yeah, it looks really a lot like the griffin. You know, there's actually a video going around that I saw online of an alleged griffin. It looks like a bird dog, like a dog bird mix or something. It's beautiful. This thing is gigantic, and I don't know if there's just one, or if this is like a lab created species or something, or I don't know if all of these old world cryptids that we hear about. Of course there's like dragons and unicorns and blemmies. Good gosh, if blemmies show back up, that's gonna be weird. Okay. Blemmies. Like there's like a torso of a human, like a human body with no head, and the face is in the chest.
Yeah.
But what if there is like a resurgence of a lot of these old world beasts and chimeras and animals, and what if that's happening now?
Yeah. That also like old world cryptids makes me think of like things like the satyr or goat man. There's all sorts of goat men reported all over the country in America. But I got a report from somebody once who lived in Greece, and they were telling me, this was early on when I started Strangeology. This is back in 2020. And they reached out to me and they're like, yeah, I was spending a week at my aunt's house, and I slept on the living room couch, and the front door to the house was off the living room. and they had next to the door they had a glass panel wall with like the opaque, or you can't see through the glass, I can't, it's like kind of like wavy glass. Yeah. And they woke up in the middle of the night and for some reason, and they walked over to the door because they saw a shadow coming through the glass that they could see, and they like looked out and there was this tall goat man standing at the front door, this like silhouette with like the horns and the cloven feet and everything. And they're like, I swear I wasn't dreaming. Like I got up and like I couldn't go back to bed after that. And it's like I'm telling my aunt I'm never sleeping at her place again. So it's just like, yeah, this stuff's everywhere,
That would be terrifying. I mean, imagine trying to go to sleep after that. It's like the devil's at your door, literally.
Right.
It would feel like, oh my gosh. Yeah, we get a lot of Goatman reports all over the place. So I have a friend who sent me a picture. He asked me not to show it. I never showed this thing. Okay, I don't even know where I put it, honestly. But he'd sent me a game trail picture of an actual Goatman, and it was not a goat. It didn't look like a goat. It's like it was like a pan character, I guess. Like from the waist down, it looked like he had hair or like a fur on from his hips down. And then from the top up, it was a man's body, like a lanky looking man with like stringy hair and a beard. And it didn't look like a goat at all on his face that I could tell, but it looked like it from the waist down. And they had been having some really interesting activity on their property. And I believe he sent me that because there had been an incident where someone had been kind of attacked or accosted on his property. And we thought it might be a goat man. I don't know. It's a long story. Okay. But then they had the picture on the game cam. It would look like an actual goat man. And we were debating, I think the debate was, well, could it have been a feral human? It could have been a feral human that was wearing some furry pants, but it was really odd.
Yeah, that is quite bizarre for sure. Yeah.
What do you guys have reports of like feral humans and stuff up in because we have them down here in the Appalachians in the South?
I'm actually I'm not familiar with any stories of feral humans per se, but that's maybe a good thing, but
it's just something else to kind of add to the mix when it comes to the cryptids in the mountains and stuff, because especially when it comes from like a researcher's perspective. I can assume y'all probably got some feral humans in Kentucky, Mark.
Yes. I have heard plenty of stories of feral humans, and just another thing to be concerned about when you're out in the woods.
Yes. Okay. Well, I want to cover a couple more cryptids too before we go, because we also have, the Bennington Triangle. Can you kind of explain what the Bennington Triangle is? Because I hear there's there's Sasquatch reports and all sorts of other high strangeness out of this area.
Yeah, for sure. So the Bennington Triangle is in the lower southwest corner of the state, on the border of Massachusetts and New York. And the term was coined by Joseph Citro back in 1992, based on all sorts of high strangeness happening around the Bennington area, specifically between the towns of Bennington, Woodford, and Shaftesbury. And at the center of it all is a ghost town called Glastonbury on top of Glastonbury Mountain. And that whole area, it used to be a thriving mill town. There was a huge logging operation that was happening there back in the 1800s. Not a huge population of people that lived there, a few hundred people. But over time, as the 19th century was coming to a close, a lot of people were starting to move out. The logging industry was kind of drying up. Most of Vermont was like clear cut by the turn of the 20th century. I think about 80% of the state was clear cut. And so I think that was possibly a reason why. Eventually there was like a casino built on top of the mountain to try and drive some tourism and to keep the place alive. But I believe it was in like 1896 or 1897, there was this really bad storm that washed away a whole bunch of roads. There was like one bridge and one road really that went in and out of the town, and it was up on a mountain, so it wasn't very easy to get up to in the first place. And so that kind of killed the town. It became unincorporated. By I think the early 1930s, there were like 3 people left living there. But over the years in that area, which is now part of a state forest, there's been reports of the Bennington monster, which is kind of like a Bigfoot. There's been UFO sightings. There's also an old legend from the Abenaki, the Iroquois, that there is a man-eating rock that lurks out in the Bennington Triangle. And the story behind that is it's like a rock that's big enough to stand on. And if you stand on it, it starts to become kind of malleable and it will swallow a person whole. Now, this might just be an allegory for something else. It's one of the more bizarre things that I've ever come across, a rock that swallows somebody. How could that be? But that's one of the strange things that you could potentially run across in the Bennington Triangle. There's also a series of missing persons reports that took place between 1945 and 1950. One of the big, more well-known cases was a hunting trail guide. This guy named Mitty Rivers, who he was in his mid 70s at the time, but he was really experienced. He was taking a tour group out 1945, 1946 or so. And they were on this trail out in the wilderness, and he rounded a corner on the trail. And as the group caught up around this corner, he was gone. He had completely vanished, like missing 411 style. And I think the only thing that was ever found of his was a shell casing from his rifle that was like down an embankment into near a river. And that was the only trace of him that they ever found. So he just like vanished into thin air. There was another case of a college student that had gone missing, a young woman who was trying to catch a ride to go see a boyfriend, I think up in Burlington, and she completely disappeared. There was an Army vet who was a couple of years later who was taking a bus from, I believe, St. Albans, which is on the northern part of the state, same side of the state, but and he had his stuff on this bus that was going down Route 7 down to Bennington. And when the bus arrived, he was gone. His stuff was still on the bus. No one remembered seeing him get off the bus. He had just like completely disappeared by the time they reached there. And then there was another story of a young child who was with his mother one day. She was out running errands, and I believe he had gotten out of the car. This was like by 1950, I believe. And he had gotten out of the car, went up a trail, and just had disappeared, unfortunately. And there was a massive search to find him, and no one ever found the kid, unfortunately. So yeah, there's some of those could certainly be explained by not surviving due to exposure to the elements. But with all the other high strangeness, cryptid sightings, UFO sightings, and that kind of stuff, it does make you wonder if potentially some of them are more inexplicable than others,
Yeah, well, I find with a lot of the missing persons clusters, they do kind of line up with the Bigfoot and cryptid sightings and the UFO sightings and the cave systems in the mountain ranges, especially in the Appalachians and all over the country, really. But it does kind of coincide, and it goes hand in hand. Now, I got to say, the first guy that went missing, at least he got a shot off. Okay, at least he shot something, hopefully on his way through the portal or wherever he went. Okay. But it's really fascinating as to the missing people and the cryptids being so being so like the sightings and that coinciding. Um, do you think that the cryptids could be responsible for some of these missing people?
It's entirely possible if there are hairy humanoids out there, or the Fae. A portal could open up. Who knows exactly? There's one story that I always remember, that's in one of I believe it's in one of David Paulides' documentaries or books, where there's a story of a family who were at a campground and the son went missing as they were playing hide and seek. And later on, another family saw something that looked like a Bigfoot carrying a kid-sized something off into the distance. And it's just like, yeah, like that, it's potential. It's kind of scary to think about, but there's definitely a chance that could be a thing.
And never take your eyes off your kid when you are in the woods. And that's coming from a lady who takes her son to the woods pretty often. And we go out, and we usually have our German Shepherd with us too. Okay. Whenever I'm out there, and we never go off trail at all. And I always have my eyes on him, and he knows better. He knows I will whoop his butt figuratively. Okay. Because there's just too many stories of children going missing. I mean, I don't even let him walk behind me ever. Like, he has to be right there in front of me at all times. So yeah, there's some real dangers out there. Okay, Jeff, what is your favorite cryptid in the entire world? Like, what is your favorite? Because I know you got one. Or
yeah, well, you'd think that being from Vermont, that my favorite cryptid would be Champ, but I actually love the story of the New Jersey Devil. So that's kind of my favorite cryptid for the time being. I've found a lot of like close seconds over the years, but the New Jersey Devil, I just love the history, the folklore. There's just so much to the story, hundreds of years worth of history with it, which is really cool.
Yeah, and they're often reported looking kind of different too. So one person will see one that looks like a goat man, and then somebody else will see one that's flying and it's got wings. And so it's really odd. I feel like there's more than just one goat man. I'm not goat man. Not goat man.
Jersey Devil, yeah.
Jersey Devil. There's definitely more than one goat man, but more than one Jersey Devil.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. And some people during the 1909 flap that happened, where hundreds of people were seeing this thing, that some people also reported seeing it like breathing fire. So it's like, is it a dragon? Like, what's going on here? Or is it really a devil? Like, is the story of Mother Leeds true? It's really interesting.
It could be. I think if I had to pick, like, I love so many different cryptids. I like the big ones though. Like just like I like, big dogs like my German Shepherd. I like the big cryptids. Okay. And so I'm really into like the Kustica and like the dog man. And of course I love my Bigfoot. So Mark, what is your favorite cryptid? Cryptidville. Do you have a favorite?
I would say probably that would have to be I'm gonna go with a classic. And that classic is gonna be the I'm trying to remember what its name is, the Tasmanian tiger, because it's actually a true cryptid now. And I say that because when you use the term cryptid is okay to use to describe these things, but some of them are not actually cryptids because they have supernatural paranormal attributes, and that falls into, in my opinion, a different category. So I'm just going to go with the standard Tasmanian tiger, and as being a favorite, I guess because I've never seen one, but I've seen just about everything else there is. I've seen Bigfoot, Dogman, Little People, you know, all manner of strangeness.
Oh yeah. Yeah, actually, Jeff, Mark has actually seen a dog man that looked like it had war paint on its face
Really?
at the LBL. Yeah, it's one of the most fascinating dog man stories that I've heard.
It's very, very
Interesting.
unique.
Yeah, very unique. It puts another layer on it. It's like it's not just
Yeah.
a dog man; it's got face paint, war paint on. So yeah, there's just such a wild and wide world of cryptids out there, and I think that you're covering so many great ones. Um, and you also have like you said champ. So there's a lot of lake monsters, and that's something that I've been looking into lately. Are lake monsters, lake mermaids. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
who would have thought we have lake mermaids all over the United States? You know, I don't know.
Yeah,
Have you dived into some lake mermaids yet on your
You
channel?
know, I haven't yet. The Mud Mermaids in Indiana is a story that I've been wanting to cover for a while, but I don't know the specifics of it. Actually, it's interesting. I actually ran across a video, and I probably should have saved it. Where some people came across a cave that had old cave paintings in, I believe it was South Africa, kind of near the Atlantic Ocean, that were like 70,000-year-old cave paintings that seemed to show a humanoid torso with a fishtail. Like,
Mm,
what else would that be? I don't know. And the legitimacy of that is unfair and unverified. But interesting that came up, a little bit of a synchronicity.
it does. Well, you know what? I really enjoy researching the Lake Pyramid mermaid. So the Lake Pyramid in Nevada, that's a place of super high strangeness too, with their water babies. I've done
Yeah.
a show on that here, and it's something to look into. So and actually my friend Mike up in New York, Long Island Bigfoot, he had a report of a lake mermaid in New York recently.
No kidding. Huh.
Yeah. No. Yeah, there's always something. We never run out of topics on the Cryptid Hunters channel. And I know you don't either. And
Yeah.
and man, there's so many great, cool cryptids out there. So yeah, well, Jeff, tell everybody in the audience where they can find you and stuff. I mean, or do you guys have any final words or any final thoughts about the Vermont cryptids tonight?
Oh gosh. I guess we didn't really, speaking of lake monsters, we didn't really mention too much about Champ.
Oh, let's talk about Champ then, because
Yeah,
I'm
Champ's
actually
the big
really
one.
interested. Because it sounds like he'd be like a Loch Ness monster, but not in Scotland. Here is that kind
Yeah.
of how he looks?
Yeah. I mean, with Nessie, there's reports going back to like the Middle Ages, of course, but the first alleged account post colonial America was from Samuel de Champlain in 1609. There was an account in Vermont Life magazine that claimed that he had seen some kind of sea serpent in the lake, but the Abenaki tribe has legends of this serpentine creature in Lake Champlain dating back millennia. They called it the Giediskog, and it was this serpent that ate humans. Now that's the Sandromancy photo, which was taken by the late Sandromancy back in 1977, while her family was driving up to the northern part of the state along the lake, the western part of Vermont, and they had stopped to have a picnic on the shores of the lake. And I believe it was, I can't remember the exact town that they were in. I think it was like south of the town of Charlotte, Ferrisburg, like that kind of area maybe. And I know they were headed up to St. Albans, and they stopped on the lake. Her kids got out. They were like playing along the banks of the lake, and all of a sudden this long-necked creature came out of the water, and was kind of coming towards them, and they were like, she was like, "Hey kids, get out of the water," and she ran to the car, grabbed her camera, and snapped that photo of this thing, and sat on it for several years until I think it was the mid 80s that she revealed that she had this photo of this lake monster that people call Champ or Champy. I prefer Champ, but yeah, it's very interesting. Skeptics say that it was probably just a log that had a weird branch on it, but I don't know. That kind of looks like an animal to me. But there's theories that it could be something like Nessie that a lot of people think is like a relic plesiosaur that somehow survived all these years. And Lake Champlain does connect eventually to the ocean through the St. Lawrence Seaway in Quebec. So some kind of large ocean animal that lives out there could very well make its way into the lake. There's theories that it's also a very large sturgeon, or even a snapping turtle, like an oversized snapping turtle.
That'd be a big neck snapping turtle.
Yeah.
Snapping turtles get big, but their necks don't go out like that outside the water. I mean, they do stretch out, but not that far.
Yeah. That was a little harder. That's a little harder of a theory for me to believe, but I've never personally seen Champ, but over the years of living in Vermont, have heard stories of people who go out on the lake to do whatever, and something brushed up against their boat that was like really big, or they saw something poke its head out of the water. So it's Lake Champlain's a pretty deep lake. There's a lot of interesting history behind it. There's shipwrecks, there's all sorts of stuff, but it's entirely possible that there's some oversized creature that is undocumented living in there, I think. And beyond that, with other lake monsters in Vermont, like Lake Memphremagog has a similar creature. I'm not terribly familiar. I think it's just kind of a similar thing. They call him Memphi. But yeah.
We not only have lake monsters, but we also have these large snakes too that I've been researching and looking into. There are large snakes and tails of these large snakes all over the place. And now, of course, in Florida, we've got the anacondas and the pythons and all that kind of stuff. But we're talking about like North Carolina and Tennessee, Kentucky. Kentucky has a big, gigantic snake, don't you? Don't you have tails of a huge snake?
Yeah, there are some tails of large snakes up in the Ohio River area, Green River area. I'm not real familiar with those stories, but I do know that there are some that come from up that way, and just regular, like rattlesnakes and things of that nature. There are areas here where they tend to get a little bit larger than normal, and I don't know if that's a genetic thing or that they just have plenty to eat there, but it's definitely interesting and definitely not my thing.
Oh, well,
I'm not a snake person.
Okay, well, I used to have a pet snake. Okay, that's something that I don't talk about often, but I had a pet snake. Don't ask me why. It was a horrible pet. I loved him or her, whatever it was, but I had it for a long time until it got really, really big. Okay, so I don't recommend them. And Ryan Tremblay, Ryan's in the chat. Hey, Ryan, he said that he saw Anaconda, the movie. That's a big note for him. Now, there is another really interesting, I almost forgot about this one, Jeff. I really wanted to ask you about this. It's the Lake Terror. Okay, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, so I'm going to pull it up on the screen. It's the one with the bunch of legs. It looks like a snake. Ooh, it looks like a snake with a bunch of legs on it.
Yeah.
Memphremagog.
Oh, yeah. The Lake Memphremagog. Memphremagog. Yeah. Okay. It's another lake. It's like in the center of Vermont, and the lake goes also into Canada. And I believe there's a town in Quebec called Magog that butts up to it. That one is a story I'm not as familiar with, but it's like a similar thing to Champ. Just, another type
Oh,
of lake monster.
okay. So this one, well, I actually, oops, I don't mean to keep pulling this picture up. I keep hitting the wrong button. Sorry. Yeah. So it looks like a snake, but it has 12 to 15 pairs of legs on it. I mean, that just sounds like a centipede snake or something. It sounds really odd. But it said the earliest record of this beast, it dates back to 1816 when Ralph Mary and his wife saw what they described as a creature that was the color of a skinned sheep. It had 12 to 15 pairs of legs, and it was in the lake. It swims too. So I mean, that would be absolutely pretty scary seeing something like. I mean, this was a large creature, so I don't know. I mean, I started
Yeah.
having a problem swimming in lakes after I did a show on the Japanese kappa. Okay, so that's just. I mean, every time I jump into the lake, I literally felt like somebody was going to grab my feet and jerk me under the water. Okay, so thanks a lot. All these shows I do, all these research. It does make you question because we just don't know what's swimming underneath us.
Yeah. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
kind of a scary thought.
It is scary. It is. Yeah. Well, we have people like you, Jeff, that highlight these wonderful local creatures, of legends and lore, and so yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on tonight and talking to us about the cryptids of Vermont with us.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been a blast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, and Mark, thank you so much for co-hosting with me tonight.
You're welcome, and thanks, Jeff, for coming on and sharing some information with us that we're not normally accustomed to. Every region has its own set of legends and myths, and it's good to learn about these things because it not only brings life to those, but it also carries the history on and allows other people to learn about things that they may not learn about otherwise.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. That's right. Well, we got to know what to look out for in these scary woods, okay, and in those lakes. That's the main thing, and to know to watch our backs when we're out in the woods. That's all. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, oh my gosh. All right. Well, I love this. Jeff, tell everybody where they can find your podcast and your Etsy shop.
Oh, sure. So my main website, where I have a blog, is strangeology.com. My Etsy shop is strangeology.etsy.com. And you can find my podcast on any major podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, etc. You can find me pretty much anywhere. I'm also on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I also have a YouTube channel as well. I make a bunch of short form video content and some longer form video content on top of the podcast. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there to check out.
Oh yeah, for sure. You guys could, I mean, you could binge watch your stuff. Oh my gosh. I know I have. I especially did today and I was loving it. Okay. So thank you so much, man. You're such a treasure for the cryptid community, putting all those videos out. So thank you. Yeah. And I learned something when I watch your videos too. So I love that. And so Mark, tell everybody about, you have a website as well. Would you like to share that with the audience?
Sure. That's cryptidville.com. I also have a YouTube channel that is linked on the website. If you are unable to find it on the YouTube search, if you plug in Cryptidville in the YouTube search, it should take you there. But yeah, that's where my website and YouTube content is located.
Well, heck yeah. All right. You guys go to cryptidville.com and check that out. All right. Well, y'all please come back and see me tomorrow night. I'm going to be on Spaced Out Radio. I have Tom Althouse as my guest tomorrow night. He is the creator of something called the Immortals, which he claims is what actually it was stolen his playwright, his script was stolen, and they made the Matrix out of that. So he is the original creator of the Matrix, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow night on the eve of the solar eclipse. Oh my gosh, y'all, Jeff and Mark, what do y'all think about this eclipse before we go tonight? Do you think this eclipse is going to affect the cryptids out there?
Well,
I think it might.
Maybe. I'm right on the edge of the path of totality, and Vermont is expecting to have like close to 250,000 people come. So I'm just gonna stay home on Monday.
I'm thinking about keeping my kid home from school that day. It sounds like it's going to be a little dicey.
Our schools are going to be closed statewide, as far as I know.
Oh my gosh, though.
Yeah.
Well, ours are not. So I may just take it upon myself to keep my kid home that day, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, everybody, please stay safe out there tonight, tomorrow, the next day. Everybody stay safe. Keep your head on a swivel. I hope everybody learned something tonight. And I want to thank everybody for your super stickers. I'm sorry I didn't call everybody out as you were leaving them, but thank you guys so much. That means the world to me. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. And so, yeah, go to Strangeology.com and to Strangeology on Etsy, and follow Jeff all over social media, you guys, and Cryptidville as well. All right, Jeff, Mark, thank y'all so much for being here. Everybody have a wonderful night, and I will see you guys tomorrow. All right, bye, y'all.